Have you ever noticed how your behavior changes the moment you realize someone is watching you? Maybe you're working in an open office and suddenly your posture straightens when your manager walks by. Or you're at the gym and you push yourself just a little harder when you sense someone's eyes on you. Even something as simple as being in front of a security camera can make you act differently. This isn't just a quirk of human nature. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon called the observer effect. And while it might sound like something from a physics textbook, in psychology it describes a simple truth. Knowing we're being watched changes the way we behave. Sometimes for the better, sometimes in ways we don't even realize. The observer effect starts with a deep evolutionary instinct. As social creatures, humans have always relied on the perception of others for survival and acceptance. Thousands of years ago, being excluded from your tribe could mean losing protection, resources, or even your life. That's why our brains developed a hypersensitivity to social evaluation. We notice eyes on us because, in the past, those eyes could determine our future. Today, that same instinct still shapes our choices, from how we walk into a room to the opinions we share online. But there's more going on beneath the surface. Psychologists describe this as self-presentation theory, the idea that we actively manage the way others see us, like we're curating a personal brand in real time. When we believe we're being observed, we subtly shift into performance mode. That might mean smiling more, hiding nervous habits, or choosing words more carefully. Sometimes this can push us toward our best selves. Think of an athlete breaking a personal record because the crowd is watching. But it can also make us act in ways that feel less authentic, like pretending to be confident when we're unsure, or agreeing with something we don't believe just to maintain approval. One fascinating example of the observer effect comes from studies on honesty. Researchers placed images of eyes above donation boxes in a workplace. Without any real person watching, contributions tripled compared to when the boxes were unmarked. Just the feeling of being observed was enough to change behavior. This is why even a silent audience, whether it's a friend, a stranger, or a recording device, can nudge our actions in subtle ways. But here's the tricky part. Being aware of the observer effect doesn't mean you're immune to it. In fact, the moment you think about how you're being perceived, you've already altered your behavior. This is where it can start to feel like a trap. If you overthink how you look to others, you may find yourself disconnected from your genuine feelings and choices. So the real skill is learning to work with this instinct rather than against it. Think of it like learning to dance with a partner who sometimes leads you in the right direction and sometimes steps on your toes. The first step is noticing when you're in performance mode. Are you speaking more formally than usual? Editing your personality to fit the room? These aren't always bad things. Context matters. But awareness gives you the option to choose whether to keep going or to return to your natural rhythm. The second step is to understand the upside of the observer effect. Being watched can boost motivation, sharpen focus, and increase accountability. If you've ever worked more efficiently in a cafe than at home alone, that's partly because the presence of others creates a mild social pressure to appear productive. Athletes, musicians, and public speakers often use this to their advantage, treating the audience as a source of energy. You can do the same in everyday life by strategically placing yourself in environments where observation will help you perform, like studying in a library instead of your bedroom or working out with a friend instead of solo. But we also need to talk about the downsides, because unmanaged, the observer effect can make your decisions less about your own values and more about fitting into expectations. This is where social media amplifies the problem. We're not just aware of being watched in the moment. We anticipate the potential audience for every post, story, or comment. This can lead to a version of life where actions are tailored for likes rather than aligned with personal goals. The constant imagined audience can push you toward a curated self, a highlight reel that feels safe to share but doesn't always reflect reality. One way to counter this is to deliberately create spaces where no one is watching, what psychologists call private practice zones. In these moments, you give yourself permission to be unobserved, unpolished, and unfiltered. This could be as simple as journaling with no intention of sharing, practicing a skill without recording, or taking a walk without telling anyone. These zones act like a mental reset button, reconnecting you with your intrinsic motivations. Another strategy is reframing observation as collaboration rather than judgment. Instead of seeing watchers as critics waiting to catch your mistakes, view them as allies who might benefit from seeing your authentic process. This subtle shift reduces anxiety and helps you stay grounded while still benefiting from the energizing effect of an audience. There's also the mirror effect, literally. Looking at yourself in a mirror while performing a task can mimic the presence of an observer and improve self-regulation. Studies have shown that people are less likely to cheat or act impulsively when facing their own reflection. You can use this intentionally. Placing a mirror in your workspace or using your camera preview during video calls can subtly keep you aligned with your own standards. The observer effect also has an interesting relationship with integrity. If you only act a certain way when people are watching, your behavior is audience dependent. But if you behave consistently regardless of observation, you're operating from internalized values. Here's a practical test. Imagine a decision you're about to make. Would you choose differently if no one ever knew about it? If the answer is yes, that's a sign the observer effect is in play. This isn't about shaming yourself. It's about understanding where external pressure is steering your choices so you can take back the wheel. The ultimate goal isn't to escape the observer effect entirely. That's impossible. But to become the one choosing how to respond to it. You can let it be a spotlight that helps you shine rather than a cage that shapes your every move. In part 2, we'll explore how to apply this awareness in specific situations, at work, in relationships, and in personal growth, and how to turn the presence of an audience, real or imagined, into a tool for becoming more of who you want to be, rather than less. Let's start with work, because for many people, the workplace is the most consistent stage where the observer effect plays out. Meetings, performance reviews, even casual conversations by the coffee machine. These are moments when you know your behavior might be noticed, remembered, and possibly judged. One practical way to use the observer effect here is to create a personal pre-performance ritual. Before walking into a meeting, take 10 seconds to anchor yourself by asking, "What's the one impression I want to leave today?" Maybe it's calm authority. Maybe it's openness to ideas. By defining this ahead of time, you consciously decide how the observer effect will influence you instead of letting it happen randomly. But there's a caution here. If your focus is entirely on image, you risk diluting substance. This is why pairing the question with, "What's the one valuable contribution I can make?" keeps you grounded in action, not just perception. In relationships, the observer effect often shows up as impression management, sometimes healthy, sometimes harmful. On the healthy side, being aware of how your partner, friend, or family member sees you can encourage kindness, patience, and attentiveness. On the harmful side, it can lead to over-curating your behavior, holding back your true feelings to avoid conflict or maintain an idealized image. One simple but powerful tool here is what I call selective transparency. This means choosing moments to let the mask drop in a safe and intentional way, sharing a genuine fear, admitting a mistake, or revealing an unpopular opinion. This not only builds trust, but also keeps you from losing touch with your authentic self in the constant act of self-presentation. When it comes to personal growth, the observer effect can be both a motivator and a trap. Take learning a new skill, whether it's playing guitar, speaking a new language, or improving your fitness. Publicly sharing your progress can boost accountability and keep you consistent, but it can also make you overly focused on looking competent rather than actually improving. This is where the concept of dual environments is useful. Have one space where you practice privately, with total permission to fail, and another where you perform publicly. Knowing the observer effect will sharpen your effort. This balance lets you benefit from both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation without becoming dependent on either. Another area where the observer effect quietly shapes us is moral behavior. Studies in behavioral science have shown that people are more likely to act ethically when they believe they're being watched. While this can be a positive force, it raises a deeper question. Do you want to be good because of others' eyes or because of your own principles? A practical exercise for building internal integrity is the closed-door check. Whenever you make a decision, imagine that the door to the room is shut and no one will ever know your choice. Would you still act the same way? If yes, you're aligning with your core values. If not, that's a sign you're leaning on the external pressure of the observer effect to guide your ethics and an opportunity to strengthen your internal compass. There's also the subtle, modern form of the observer effect we all live with, the algorithmic gaze. Even when no human is actively watching, we know our data, clicks, and choices are being recorded, analyzed, and potentially surfaced to an audience later. This can unconsciously change the way we browse, post, or even think. One countermeasure here is conscious digital boundaries, deciding which parts of your life are shareable and which are sacred. The more intentional you are about what you put in view, the less you risk living in reaction to invisible observers. To make the observer effect work for you rather than against you, Think in terms of 3 modes: harness, neutralize, and escape. Harness it when you need a boost, like practicing a speech in front of a friend to mimic stage conditions. Neutralize it when it's pushing you toward inauthenticity, like reminding yourself of your long-term goals before responding to an audience's expectations. And escape it when you need to reconnect with your unfiltered self, through solitude, anonymity, or deliberately unplugging from networks of observation. Over time, you'll notice that the observer effect becomes less of an unconscious force and more of a tool you can pick up or put down depending on the situation. Instead of being molded by the eyes on you, you learn to decide which parts of yourself to amplify, which to protect, and which to evolve. You'll still feel that ancient instinct to adjust when watched. It's hardwired, but it will no longer hijack your choices. Instead, it will become a subtle ally, one that can sharpen your performance when needed and step back when not. The truth is, we're never fully alone. Even in solitude, we often carry an imagined audience in our minds, a composite of parents, friends, coworkers, or even strangers whose opinions we've internalized over the years. Recognizing this is the first step to freedom, because once you know the audience is there, you can decide how much of a role they get in your story. And here's the paradox. The more you consciously manage the observer effect, the more authentic you can become. By understanding when and how you're influenced by being seen, you give yourself the power to show up in ways that align with both who you are and who you want to be. So next time you feel yourself shift under someone's gaze, don't just react. Pause, notice, decide. That pause is the space where authenticity lives. And in that space, you're no longer just performing, you're choosing. If this idea challenged the way you think about your own behavior, imagine what else you could do with a toolkit for better thinking. That's what we explore here on Mind Unlocked. So if you found value in this, share it with someone who might see themselves in these patterns, like the video to help it reach more curious minds, and subscribe to join a community learning not just what to think, but how to think in a way that's both free and deeply aware.